I didn't expect the smell of hay to stir something in me, but that's how it always starts, unexpectedly. One moment I'm walking into the barn for fresh air, trying to clear my head, and the next, memories rush in. Summer's the first thought I'd outgrown, the steady weight of change pressing against the edges of my life. Tonight though, the barn isn't just about nostalgia, it's about him. What? He'd been my shadow for as long as I could remember, though he'd never admit it. We grew up in the same neighborhood, separated by 3 driveways and a crooked fence we both climbed too many times. He'd end up on my porch with his bike chain perpetually broken, or I'd find myself in his garage pretending to know how to fix a carburetor. We weren't inseparable exactly, but there was always this pull. Now years later, here we were again. Only instead of 2 kids sneaking sodas from my dad's fridge, we were adults, and the air between us wasn't just thick with dust and hay, it was thick with something unspoken. The barn belonged to his uncle, and Eli had dragged me here under the pretense of helping out with a weekend project. Something about repairing old rafters before the weather turned. He knew I'd say yes. I always did. I leaned against one of the posts, pretending to inspect the beams, though my eyes kept betraying me, flicking toward him. He moved with a kind of ease I envied, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the lamplight catching in his hair. His laugh, low, unhurried, bounced off the rafters when I made a sarcastic remark about his hammering skills. It was the kind of laugh that hit me harder than it should have. I told myself it was nothing. Just an old friend, just an old barn, just another night like countless others. But my chest didn't buy it. My chest ached with every glance, every second of silence that stretched a little too long. The truth is, I came out here for air because being around Eli never gave me any. He filled every space I walked into, left me restless with things I never dared say. Maybe it was safer to keep it that way, to let the barn creak, to let the dust settle, to let the night pass without naming the weight between us. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the smell of rain pressing in through the cracked window, or the way his shoulder brushed mine when he passed me the wrench. Maybe it was simply time. Because as much as I tried to laugh it off, some part of me knew something was about to shift, and once it did, nothing between us would be the same. Eli and I had this rhythm. We'd fall into it the second we were in the same space, like no time had passed, even if it had been weeks or months. That was the thing about him, he carried familiarity the way other people carried wallets. Always on him. Always there when I needed it. We'd known each other since before we really knew ourselves. Elementary school field trips where we swapped lunches because I hated apples and he hated chips. Middle school afternoons when he dared me to climb the water tower even though I nearly slipped. High school nights when he'd sneak me into the football field after dark just to lie on the 50-yard line and point out constellations he couldn't actually name. Some friendships fade when life pulls you in different directions. Ours never did. If anything, the distance only made me notice the pull more. Don't just stand there pretending you know what you're looking at, Eli teased, his voice pulling me back to the barn. He was balancing on a ladder, hammer in one hand, nails in the other. That beam isn't going to hold itself up. I rolled my eyes and picked up a board, though I wasn't sure where he wanted it. You've got a real bossy streak for someone who almost nailed his thumb 10 seconds ago. He shot me a grin, the kind that showed the dimple he hated when we were kids. That was a practice swing. Sure, I said. If practice means screaming like a wounded animal. His laugh cracked through the dust, warm and familiar. God, I'd missed that sound more than I wanted to admit. The complication started small, the way most things do. A quick flicker of lightning outside the barn doors. A faint rumble that rattled the roof. Storm wasn't supposed to hit until tomorrow, Eli muttered, glancing out the wide barn window. Yeah, well, weather apps lie. I tilted my head toward the dark sky rolling in. You think your uncle's fine with us camping out here? Eli smirked, climbing down the ladder with the ease of someone who never doubted his footing. You scared of a little rain? Not rain, I said quickly, too quickly. Just, what if we get stuck? The words left my mouth heavier than I intended, and Eli's eyes flicked to mine in a way that made my chest tighten. He didn't answer right away, just walked past me to check the door, shoulder brushing mine in the process. The contact lingered longer than necessary, though neither of us moved. Guess we're stuck together then, he said softly, almost like it wasn't about the storm at all. I busied myself with stacking tools we didn't really need, anything to keep from staring too long. But every time I caught his gaze, even for a fraction of a second, it was like being pulled under. His eyes held that easy confidence I envied, and sometimes, just sometimes, I thought I saw something flicker behind them. Something uncertain. Something that mirrored the mess in my own chest. The rain came fast, hammering against the tin roof in heavy sheets, drowning out every sound but our voices. Eli and I dragged an old tarp and a couple of blankets into the loft, laughing as we tried to shake the dust off. He spread one blanket out, then looked at me expectantly. "Cozy enough?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I glanced at the single blanket between us, heart stuttering. "Depends," I said. "You planning to hog it like you did that time at camp?" "Hey," he protested, grinning. I was freezing. "You had 2 sleeping bags. You still remember that?" I shrugged, trying to look casual. "Some things stick." The words slipped out before I could stop them, and for a second, his expression softened. The barn was dim except for the glow of the lantern, but it was enough to see the way his smile faltered. Not in a bad way, but in a way that felt too close, too sharp. I looked away first, pretending to fuss with the tarp. My pulse drummed in my ears louder than the rain. Whatever this was, this history, this rhythm, it had always been safe. But safety was starting to feel a lot like longing, and longing had a way of breaking things wide open. The storm was louder than I expected. It wasn't just rain, it was a full-on downpour, the kind that swallowed the horizon and made the world feel small. Thunder cracked, rattling the barn doors on their hinges, and lightning lit up the loft in white flashes. For a second I wondered if the roof would hold. Eli had sprawled out on the blanket we dragged upstairs, one arm tucked behind his head, as if the storm was just background noise to him. I sat cross-legged a few feet away, pretending to fiddle with my phone though there was no signal out here. My eyes kept betraying me, sliding toward him, tracing the way his shirt clung to his chest from the humidity, the way his hair stuck up in damp strands where the rain had caught him earlier. "Relax," he said suddenly, glancing at me with that maddening calm of his. "You look like you're waiting for the roof to collapse." I scoffed. "You've seen this barn. Wouldn't be the craziest thing to happen." He chuckled, low and warm, and shifted onto his side to face me. The movement brought him closer, close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne, woodsy, familiar. Too familiar. "You always overthink everything," he teased, propping his head up with his hand. "Even as a kid. I'd say, 'Let's ride down the hill,' and you'd be calculating the odds of breaking a bone." "Someone had to," I muttered, though the corner of my mouth betrayed me with a smile. His grin widened. "And yet you always came with me." That shut me up. He wasn't wrong. For all my nerves, all my carefulness, I'd always followed him, even into the things that scared me. Maybe especially into those. Another roll of thunder shook the walls, and instinctively I flinched. Before I could play it off, Eli reached over, brushing his fingers lightly against my wrist. It was nothing, barely a touch, but it was enough to set every nerve in my arm buzzing. "Hey," he said softly, almost drowned out by the storm. "It's fine. We're fine." I nodded, though my throat felt too tight to answer. I wanted to lean into the touch, to hold on to it, but the thought of what that would mean, what it could unravel, froze me in place. He pulled his hand back after a moment, leaving the ghost of warmth on my skin that I couldn't stop thinking about. We sat in silence for a while, the rain filling the gaps in our conversation. I lay back eventually, staring up at the rafters, trying to focus on the steady rhythm of water instead of the chaos inside me. But then Eli shifted again, rolling closer, so close our shoulders brushed. "Blanket's not big enough for 2 people sitting miles apart," he said casually, tugging at the corner. I laughed weakly. "Pretty sure it's not big enough for 2 people at all." "Guess we'll find out," he replied, pulling half over me before I could protest. The fabric smelled faintly of dust and cedar, but beneath that, there was him. I swallowed hard, lying stiff as a board while he stretched out beside me. His leg brushed mine just lightly, but enough to send sparks through me. This was torture. Beautiful, unbearable torture. Every breath felt too loud, every movement too noticeable. I wanted to turn toward him, to close the space, but fear rooted me in place. If I let myself slip, if I admitted how badly I wanted him, what if it broke everything? What if he laughed, or worse, pulled away? And yet, he didn't seem to be pulling away. He shifted again, settling onto his back with a sigh. Our arms touched now, the barest press of skin against skin, and instead of moving he stayed there. Comfortable. Easy. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You ever think about those nights at the football field?" he asked suddenly, voice quieter now. My chest tightened. "Yeah," I said after a beat, keeping my eyes on the ceiling. "Why?" He shrugged, and I felt the motion ripple through the blanket between us. "Dunno. Just, we used to lie there for hours. Didn't matter if it was freezing or if we had homework or anything. We just stayed. You and me." I turned my head then, slowly, against my better judgment. His profile was lit by the lantern glow, soft and impossibly close. His lips curved into the faintest smile. "I liked those nights," he added. Something in me cracked at that. I wanted to ask what he meant, whether he liked the stars, the quiet, or simply being with me, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead I whispered, "Me too." Silence again. Only it wasn't empty, it hummed between us, thick and charged. My pulse raced so hard I thought he'd hear it. He shifted slightly, his hand brushing mine under the blanket. Not holding. Just touching. Casual maybe. Or maybe not. I didn't move. Couldn't. The storm raged outside, but inside that loft the air felt different. Electric in its own way but fragile, like one wrong word would shatter it. I wanted to stay in that space forever, but I knew it couldn't last. Something was building. Something had to give. And deep down I was terrified of what would happen when it did. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it seemed to be moving closer, pressing in on the barn with sheets of rain so heavy it felt like the world outside had dissolved into water and lightning. The roof creaked under the onslaught, and every rumble of thunder shook the air around us. But it wasn't the storm that made my chest feel tight, it was Eli's hand brushing mine under the blanket. I could have moved. Should have moved. But I didn't. I let my fingers hover close enough that the air between us seemed to spark. My pulse was hammering in my ears and I couldn't tell if it was fear or longing, or both tangled together. Eli shifted slightly, his voice low. "You're quiet tonight." I swallowed hard. "Just thinking." "About what?" His tone was easy, but there was a weight under it, like he wanted the truth. I hesitated. The truth was dangerous. The truth could break everything. But my chest ached with how badly I wanted to let it out, how tired I was of carrying it around like a secret I couldn't put down. "Nothing important," I said, forcing a laugh. Eli studied me, eyes catching the lantern light. "You're a bad liar." That pulled a real laugh out of me, nervous and sharp. "Yeah, well, you've had a lifetime to figure me out." He smiled, but it faded quickly. "So tell me then. What's got you so tangled up?" The directness of it hit me like a punch. I turned my face toward the ceiling again, trying to breathe past the lump in my throat. I could feel his gaze still on me, heavy, expectant. "It's stupid," I murmured. "Try me." The silence stretched, thick and unbearable. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might leap out of my chest. I wanted to tell him. God, I wanted to tell him. But what if it ruined this? What if he pulled away, left me with nothing but the echo of what could have been? But then his hand shifted under the blanket. Not gripping mine. Not bold. Just closer. Close enough that our pinkies brushed. Deliberate. That was all it took. My voice cracked. I forced myself to keep going. "I've been holding something in for a long time. And I don't know if I should say it. I don't know if it's worth the risk." Eli's brow furrowed, concern flickering across his face. "Hey," he said gently. "You can tell me. You know that, right?" I laughed weakly, shaking my head. "That's the problem. I can't. Because if I do, things might change. And I don't want to lose this." His eyes softened, but he didn't speak right away. He waited. He always waited when it mattered. I stared at the ceiling, willing myself to breathe. Then, before I could stop myself, the words tumbled out. "It's you." My chest burned as I said it. "It's always been you. And I don't know what to do with that." The storm filled the silence that followed. My heart sank like a stone, the air thick with the weight of what I'd just thrown between us. I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Finally, Eli exhaled, long and shaky. "You think you're the only one scared of screwing this up?" My head snapped toward him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't teasing. His expression was raw, almost uncertain in a way I'd never seen. "What?" I breathed. He shifted closer, close enough that our knees touched under the blanket. "You think I haven't been carrying the same thing around? Afraid to say it because I didn't want to lose you?" For a moment I just stared at him, stunned. The barn, the storm, the years of silence, all of it blurred into nothing. It was just him. Just us. "Eli," my voice broke on his name. He reached up then, hesitating halfway before letting his hand rest against my jaw. The touch was feather-light, but it unraveled me completely. My eyes fluttered shut, breath catching. "I didn't want to push you," he whispered. "I figured if you wanted to say something, you would. But God, I've wanted to." The air between us throbbed with everything unsaid, everything we'd buried for so long. My hand found his wrist without thinking, holding it there against my face. "Then say it," I whispered back. He drew in a shaky breath, eyes locking on mine. "I'm in love with you." The words hit me harder than the thunder. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, only feel. Relief, joy, terror, all tangled into one dizzy rush. I let out a laugh that was half a sob, pressing my forehead against his. "You have no idea how long I've needed to hear that." His lips brushed mine then, not quite a kiss, just the faintest graze, tentative and trembling. A question. I answered it by closing the distance. The kiss was slow, careful, almost fragile. Years of longing poured into it, but also restraint, like we were both afraid to shatter the moment. His hand slid to the back of my neck, anchoring me, while my fingers gripped his shirt as if to keep him from slipping away. When we finally broke apart, breathing ragged, he rested his forehead against mine again. His eyes were shining, though whether from the lantern or something else I couldn't tell. I don't want this to mess us up, he said softly. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. I swallowed, heart still racing. Then we don't pretend anymore. We figure it out. Together. He smiled then, small but real, the kind of smile that made my chest ache in the best way. Outside the storm raged on. But inside that barn, with Eli's hand still tangled in mine, I felt like I'd finally found something steady. Something worth the risk. For a long moment after our lips parted, neither of us spoke. The storm filled in the silence, pounding on the tin roof with relentless rhythm, but it didn't matter. All I could feel was Eli's hand still cupping the back of my neck, steady and warm, and the ghost of his mouth on mine. I'd spent years imagining what this might feel like, too many nights lying awake, wondering how it would change us if I ever let it happen. And now it wasn't imagination anymore. It was him. It was us. I let out a shaky laugh, leaning back just enough to see his face. So, was that real? Eli finished for me, a crooked smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, very real. The tension that had held me hostage all night cracked into something lighter, easier. I found myself laughing again, though my chest still felt raw. You're sure you're not just saying that because we're stuck in a barn during a thunderstorm? He gave me a mock glare. If I needed a storm as an excuse to kiss you, I'd have been waiting a long time. That made heat flood my face, and I shoved his shoulder lightly. You could have said something. And risked scaring you off? He raised an eyebrow. You think I haven't seen the way you avoid eye contact when things get too quiet? Or the way you deflect whenever I get too close? I froze, caught. You noticed that? Eli chuckled, softer this time. I notice everything about you. Always have. That admission hit me almost harder than the kiss had. My throat tightened, but this time it wasn't fear, it was something close to joy. I didn't have to hide anymore. We shifted onto the blanket, lying side by side, shoulders pressed together as though it had always been this way. His hand found mine again, not tentative this time. We laced our fingers without hesitation, and I couldn't stop staring at the sight of it, our hands finally fitting where they belonged. Okay, I said, exhaling slowly. So what happens now? I mean, us. Eli turned his head toward me, his expression steady, thoughtful. We take it slow. Figure it out. I'm not going anywhere. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You make it sound simple. He smirked. That's because it is. You and me, we've been doing this forever. This just makes sense. I wanted to believe him. And maybe, for once, I could. We lay there talking as the storm raged on outside, about the dumb things we remembered from childhood, the moments we'd secretly wanted more but never dared to admit it, the fears we'd carried about losing each other. Every confession felt like peeling back another layer of something I hadn't realized I'd been wearing, heavy and suffocating. At one point, Eli nudged me with his shoulder. So, if we're being honest here, you've got to admit I've always been the brave one. I rolled my eyes, grinning despite myself. Brave? You nearly broke your neck falling out of the water tower ladder. And you still climbed up after me. His grin widened triumphantly. Which means I lead, you follow. Works out nicely. I squeezed his hand, feigning exasperation. God, I can't believe I'm actually in love with this version of you. His eyes softened and he leaned closer, pressing a kiss to my temple. Good thing I'm in love with every version of you. The words settled over me like the storm quieting into a steady drizzle, soaking into the cracks I hadn't realized were still open. For the first time in years, I wasn't suffocating under what I couldn't say. I wasn't restless or aching with what-ifs. I was just here with him. Eventually, the thunder rolled further away, the sharp edges of the storm softening into something gentler. The lantern flickered low, and Eli tugged me closer until my head rested against his shoulder. My body relaxed into his without a fight, as though it had always belonged there. Tomorrow, I murmured, half asleep already, things might feel different. Yeah, he agreed, his voice low, steady against my ear. Then he squeezed my hand. But not worse. Never worse. The barn was quiet except for the rain the storm spent. I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm of his breathing anchor me. Tomorrow would bring questions, challenges, maybe even complications neither of us could predict. But for now, in this loft, with his arm around me and our fingers tangled, tomorrow felt like something I wasn't afraid of anymore. For the first time, tomorrow felt like ours. Morning came soft and quiet, as if the world itself knew not to disturb us. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, leaving the barn washed clean, beams glistening faintly where water had leaked through. I woke to pale light filtering through the cracks in the wood, and the first thing I felt was warmth. Eli's arm draped heavy across my chest, his breath steady against the side of my neck. For a moment I didn't move. I just lay there, soaking in the weight of him, the impossibility of it all. Last night still felt like a dream, the kiss, the words we'd finally dared to speak. But his hand, curled lazily against my shirt, made it real. I turned slightly, careful not to wake him, and studied his face in the morning light. He looked younger when he slept, all the edges softened. I thought about the years we'd spent dancing around this, about all the moments I'd nearly told him but hadn't. And now here we were. His eyes blinked open, slow and drowsy. When they landed on me, he smiled. Not the cocky grin he usually wore, but something gentler, private. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I whispered back. We stayed like that for a while, just looking at each other, both of us too content, or maybe too afraid, to break the spell. Finally, Eli stretched, groaning dramatically as he pulled his arm tighter around me. "You're comfy," he said into my shoulder. I snorted. "I'm not a pillow." Could have fooled me. He grinned against my shirt, and I couldn't help laughing even as I shoved at him half-heartedly. Felt so easy. Easier than I'd expected. The fear was still there, somewhere under the surface, but it was softened now by the reality of his hand still holding on to me, by the memory of his lips on mine. Eventually we sat up, both of us reluctant to leave the blanket. The barn smelled of damp hay and wet earth, but outside the air was fresh, the kind that only comes after a storm. We stepped out together, blinking into the washed-out morning. The field stretched wide, drops of water clinging to every blade of grass, sparkling like a promise. Eli bumped my shoulder with his. "So, you think last night was just a one-time barn romance, or?" I glanced at him, catching the playful glint in his eyes, and shook my head. "You're insufferable. And yet," he held out his hand, palm up, daring me, "you're still here." I looked at his hand, the familiar calluses, the steadiness of it, and something inside me loosened. I slid my fingers into his without hesitation this time. His grin softened into something quieter, more certain. "No storm required," I said. He squeezed my hand, then leaned in close, his voice low enough only I could hear. "Good. Because I'm not planning on letting go." It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't fireworks or fanfare. But it was more than enough. We started walking back toward the house, still hand in hand. Every step felt like something new, something fragile and thrilling. There would be questions ahead, maybe even doubts. Friends who might notice the shift, family who might not understand. But for the first time, none of that scared me. Because Eli was right beside me, fingers locked with mine, as if to remind me this wasn't just a dream we'd wake up from. This was the beginning of something real. Halfway down the path, he glanced sideways at me, smirking. "You know, if anyone asks, I'm telling them you confessed first." I rolled my eyes, but my chest felt impossibly light. "Fine. As long as you don't leave out the part where you were terrified too." "Terrified?" He scoffed. "Please." I was composed. Charming. Basically irresistible. I laughed, the sound spilling out of me as freely as the morning air. "Yeah, sure. Whatever helps you sleep at night." His laughter joined mine, the two sounds weaving together in a way that felt like it always should have. And as we walked, side by side, hand in hand, the barn shrinking behind us and the day unfolding ahead, I realized I wasn't afraid of change anymore. Because change had brought me here. To him. To us. And this was only the beginning.